Welcome to the October 19th OpenJ9 community call. As always, please add your name and affiliation to the list of attendees, just so we know who's been regularly attending these calls. And so I'll pause for a minute here and give people a chance to add any topics to the agenda that aren't there. If there's something you want to talk about today that's not already on the agenda, we can tackle it now, or you're welcome to add it to the Any Other Business section. This isn't your only opportunity, so if you do think of something throughout the course of the meeting you want to tackle later, feel free to add it into that Any Other Business section as well. This week, we have the second part of Geeta's Vector API Lightning talk. So I'll turn things over to her at this point. Geeta, if you want to take over the screen sharing.
Yes. Can you see my screen?
Not yet. Or I see a blue screen. I don't see slides yet, so.
Actually, 1 second, I think I'm sharing the wrong thing.
See slides now.
You can see a slide now. Great. All right. So, 1 second. So today I'll give a part 2 Vector API Lightning talk. By the way, my apologies if somebody already seen that presentation because I gave it before, but hopefully it will be useful for other people as the recording. So last time I talked about Vector API externals and internals, and today I'll talk about acceleration in a bit more details because it's, of course, the most important part of the job is actual acceleration of the library. So first I'll talk a bit more details about acceleration, then present latest results, and then talk about releases on a bit higher level. So here's the same example that I showed last time. It's addition of two float arrays, A, B, and C, written in Vector API. But today I wanted to talk about what happens, a bit more about the behind the scenes within API. First, of course, we have a call species with determined length on each iteration. Then we have from array, which is a virtual call on this class, and which in turn calls other virtual calls and other virtual calls, and it essentially reads one element at a time from array A, and copies them into payload, and then wraps payload into object of type, actually float 128 vector specific type. Similar with another from array, and method add, again, like iterates through payload of each vector as element by element, creates new payload and puts it into new object on heap. And similarly with into array. So to summarize, there are a lot of virtual calls, heap allocations, and actual iterations through payload arrays, sort of like small loops within that main loop. And also there's a code that does it's library code, Java code that does all kind of like bound checking, which all together makes, of course, that loop execute quite, relatively slowly, like it's pretty expensive code. But ideally, we would like to have something like this loop written in a pseudocode, which is actually very close to OpenJ9 JIT-IL. So non-iteration, like a constant, like for in this case, one vector load from array A, another vector load from B, one vector add, one vector store, very tight small loops, or like optimal loop. But sometimes, for example, we might not have that IL opcode or it's not implemented, there's no evaluator for that, so, or that would generate a specific instruction, or maybe there is no even instruction on some platform. So in that case, what we can do is something we call scalarization. And then we can just use existing opcodes, like for example, float load, float add, and store. Of course, there will be 4 times more opcodes in this loop, but still much faster than this original loop. And eventually, after we do that, in case of vectorization, we'll get, for example, on power, and we already do get this code, like we already implemented it for addition. It's like this X instruction on power for load, another vector load, addition, vector addition, and vector store, and then a bit of extra code I'll talk about in a second. And for scalarization, will be 8 floating point single precision loads, and then adds for adds and for stores, like for example at STFS. And again, a little bit of extra code. This is related to what I mentioned before, like those library code. Like basically, there is some code that we would like to optimize away, but just due to specifics of the library, we didn't manage it. But eventually, we would like to optimize some like index calculations. Well, so that effect of vectorization is more noticeable comparing to scalarization. So how do we do acceleration? There are 3 important phases. The first is optimization. Like as I mentioned, we need to devirtualize all those methods, and we do that with the help of force inline and stable annotations that I mentioned in part 1. We already have, of course, mechanisms for devirtualization, which is pretty powerful, but we just need to make sure that all of that happens in the case of the library. Then we, of course, need to propagate vector lengths and type and lengths to the intrinsics. It's like mostly global value propagation does that, but some extra work specific to the library. And that code, as I mentioned, like we need to optimize away all these bound checks, which is not really so specific to the library. It's like common optimizations, but in some cases it just doesn't happen. So we need to do that in order for vectorization to have sort of to show benefit of vectorization, and probably most likely we'll be adding like new optimization strategies specific, like say for example program has vector API in it, there will be like certain like sequence of the optimizations that we need to work on to figure out what exactly this sequence should be. So second phase is vector API expansion, which is essentially escape analysis. This is when we convert those heap objects to temporaries on stack, and which eventually should be allocated into registers. For in case of scalarization, we would create, for example, in our case, in that example, we'll have like 4 float temps and 4 float additions, and those 4 float temps will be put into floating point registers. In case of vectorization, we replace 1 heap object with 1 temporary of type vector on stack, and then eventually allocate it to vector register. So we first try to vectorize, of course, but if something is missing on a platform, then we scalarize. And scalarization in itself provides 15 and even bigger speed up depending on method. And of course, in case of vectorization, we eventually need to generate those instructions specific for each platform, for each method and species. So big number of unique instructions need to be generated. And this work is not needed for scalarization because, of course, we already have those scalar opcodes implemented. So in terms of results, as I mentioned, most of the work was common, like most of the work was in the first phase, but I'll show results for now specific for power. So we scalarize or vectorize these basic methods, load, store, and that basic arithmetic. And on power, since it only supports vector of 128 bit, we did vectorization only for this species. For the rest, we did scalarization, but as you can see right now, like there are good results, 10x, but they all are like across 10x across the species, whether they vectorize or scalarize. It's because we still need to do more optimizer work to optimize away that extra code in the loop. But scalarization and vectorization itself kind of works already. And of course, with every future release, we're hoping this number will be increasing and this number decreasing. We'll scalarize and vectorize more and more methods with each release. And talking about releases, it's all started in 0.26, Java 16, like it was first incubator, but we only did some prototyping at that time. And then in 0.27, we started doing that optimization work, that phase one. In 0.28 timeframe, we implemented stable and forced inline annotations, which we didn't have before. So now we do recognize them and accelerate code based on those annotations. And of course, more like optimizer work. And in 0.29, we merged the second phase, Vector API expansion engine, and some optimize work. And as I mentioned, as a result, we got like 10x improvement on power. In terms of other platforms, as you can see, all work was common, right? So you might ask why other platforms didn't get speed up. It's just some subtle differences in optimizer. So just a little bit of more work, and I think we'll get 10x on other platforms as well. And even independent of vectorization or scalarization, due to all these common changes like annotations and optimizer improvement, we got around 30x improvement on some methods, even without vectorization or scalarization. And for next release, we are targeting top 30 slowest methods plus matrix multiplication. And big part of work for this time frame will be actually vector IL design. We need to finalize. We already have a draft, and I think when we finalize vector IL design thing, we'll be getting more and more methods and like opcodes next year, I think. And of course, like common optimization and scalarization work still can continue, and a little bit of vectorization for this release, and next year I think will be a lot of like code gen work. I think vectorization on all platforms, actually generating those vector instructions. So that's all for me today. Thanks.
Thanks, Gita. It's a really interesting talk.
Thank you.
Is the scalarization something that's unique to the approach that we've taken?
I think so. Yeah, I think it's yeah. I don't know of other implementations that do that.
Any other questions for Gita? Great. Thanks so much, Gita. Get this posted in the next day or two. But then at this point, I guess we'll jump back into the regular agenda. So I'll pull that back up. Take a quick look at the new user-raised issues that have come in. So there's a GC performance question that's been raised. There's an issue with the JVM-TI VM start callback that's being looked at. Those are the two that have come in since the last one of these calls. Is there anything else in this list that needs some discussion today? All right, then we will jump back to the agenda. In the interest of time, I'll skip over the download stats. We'll get to the release. We have the 0.29 release, which is, as Peter mentioned on Slack this morning, something we're actively doing the update for, and I see that we've closed out or moved out all the items other than the OpenSSL update. Pete, how are the builds for this going?
Builds haven't started yet. We're waiting for OpenJDK to release the release content. So it usually doesn't happen until the afternoon. We've seen it as late as 4 or 5 p.m., but usually it's around noon.
Excellent. Then we'll pull that in for 8 and 11, and I assume we'll update our 17 OpenJDK clone as well.
Yeah, we'll pull in 1701 and run an acceptance build on that and pull it into all the right places. But of course, we won't be doing a release yet for 17.
So it sounds like the 8 and 11 releases seem to be, assuming there's no hiccups when we pull in the updates, should be going out smoothly and on time.
Hopefully.
Which brings us to the 17 release then. I open up the release plan. We're, I think, up one since last week to 15 items that we're tracking.
There was something moved back into plan this morning. I don't think it really needs to be in plan. We could move it out again. Also, there was some request to remove the blocker label from some things this morning, so the stats don't quite match reality at the moment. So I think we're getting closer. There's only a few blockers left. And probably we could move more of these things out, but we also have to do some bookkeeping, like make sure we've unexcluded all the tests that we need to unexclude.
I see 3 of these at least have pull requests attached to them. Are they close to being merged?
So one of them is merged in head and just needs to be merged into the release branch. One of them has an open pull request in OMR, and we're waiting for reviews on that. And then I'm not sure about the third one.
So with those 3, that'll bring us down a number of issues, and hopefully more than just the ones that are currently tagged against them. Do we have a feeling on what the delay is? Have we had a chance to characterize that a little more tightly than we had last week?
Sorry, what are you asking?
I'm asking, last week we said the duration of the 17 delay was unknown. It's characterized both as months, not weeks. Toby had characterized it as probably a month delay. We were going to wait for some feedback from the JIT team on they saw the delay as being like, and I'm just wondering if we've been able to tighten that estimate at all.
We have Daryl. Yeah, Daryl's on, so we could ask him what his feeling is about how long it's going to take to fix the remaining blockers. Plus, there's the unknown if 1701 is going to raise any new issues.
Right. So of the 4 blockers, 3 are with the JIT. We have fixes for 2 of them, as Pete already said. And the third one, we just need to review some of the JIT memory usage to understand if we can just put a workaround in place for that. But I mean, if we're just focusing on the blockers from the JIT perspective, a month certainly seems more than reasonable. Or I guess now it would be 3 weeks seems more than reasonable. Don't have a status off the top of my head for the non-blocker issues, as the team has been focused mostly on the ones preventing release.
Yeah, so there's not much stopping us from moving the non-blocker issues out. I think we wanted to keep some of them in the plan because they seem to be actively worked, and just in case we'd found some solutions before the blockers were resolved, we could have considered putting in fixes. But if they're non-blockers and we don't have fixes, I think they can just move out.
Just going to pull the plan back up for a second again. How many of the non-blocker items are crashes or unknown exceptions?
You can look through and see which ones are tagged with segfault, but just because they're crashes doesn't mean we can repeat them. So they're non-blockers because they're very intermittent or we can't repeat them at all. So it's possible some of them have even been resolved already with other fixes.
Yeah, and the ones that are method handle related, 2 of the blocker ones are, there are some 2 of the blocker ones that we have fixed are somewhat fundamental failures, so they may fix it may cause some of the other ones to go away. I'm not sure about that. it's certainly possible.
So it might be worth landing those 3 PRs at least and see if any of these other items become non-reproducible at that point.
Right.
Great. We're still looking at 3 weeks to a month delay ship this. So if I'm just trying to pull up a calendar, sorry. So we're looking at mid-November. Basis of that. All right, then I guess that's the major point we need to be working towards and seeing what we can do to keep bringing that date in. Appreciate all the work that people have put into bringing down these items. I know they're not easy ones to resolve.
We were looking at creating another milestone build, maybe next Monday. Hopefully the PRs will be in by then, and we'll have 1701, so we could put out another milestone build with all the latest updates.
This would be milestone 1 for the 29.1 release. And sorry, Pete, you said next Monday?
Tentatively next Monday. I think we should wait for those 2 PRs to get into the release stream.
Okay, I'll have to do some work to get that one into the release stream. The developer is currently on vacation, so
I'll cherry pick it if you want, and you can do the merging.
Sure. Work. Thanks, Pete.
That would be good to give the people who are testing out our builds a little more stable to test out on and highlight any issues that do show up still. Anything else on the releases? Then, do we have an update from the Adopt team? See anybody relevant on the call today, so we'll skip over that. Adam, is there an update on the infrastructure?
Actually, before Adam gets started, I just want to clarify, we would start the milestone on Monday. It doesn't mean it would go out on Monday, so it might go out next Wednesday if we start on Monday. We'd have to build it and triage the results and make sure it looks good.
Thanks for that clarification, Pete. Adam, is there an update on the infrastructure?
Yeah. So for the ARch machine from Equinix, we got a new machine online now, so we just have to transfer our KVM images over to that one. So hopefully we can get that sorted out shortly, and hopefully everything just works. The Macs at UNB, we have the 2 X Macs online added to Jenkins. There seems to be a problem with number 1. The builds are hanging on it, so I tried rebooting it, but it doesn't seem to have changed anything, so we have to do some investigation there. Number 2 seems to be okay. So once my test finishes, I'll add back the labels to get it back in the pool. For the ARch machines, I've been trying to add them to Jenkins this morning. There is a few small issues, so hopefully I can get those sorted out and get them online, and then get a build going on there over the next little while. That's about it for machines.
Thanks, Adam.
If there's questions.
Doesn't sound like it, so we'll move to the CMake migration, but I don't see Devin on the call. Toby, do you know what the state of that is?
I was on mute. I'm not sure exactly the current status. I know that Devin's been looking at a couple things, some non-CMake related things, so I think the CMake progress has slowed there, but I think we can get an update in the next meeting.
Thanks, Toby. Is Marius on the call? Marius,
Yeah, yes, I am. Yeah, we're on track to GA with 0.29. No issues ahead.
With 0.29 or with 0.29.1?
0.29. So GServer worked fine with Java 8 and 11.
Okay, that's great. Is there anything else you want to call out around the GServer work?
No, so currently we are trying to make operators work. That's going to be a long endeavor. We are asking for help from the Liberty team, but Liberty team, the people that are working on operators are busy with their own agenda. So what we want is to push more on them, but it fell back on us.
Okay. There is a Java operator SDK.
I know, but I think we may want to leverage more of the Liberty infrastructure. So we want to roll out the GServer operator somehow into the Liberty operator, or at least the client part of that. And since they are based on Go, probably we should have our own implemented in Go.
We will also have to go around the loop there on being able to release that being a source-only project. So we'll have to figure out what the right release mechanism is there.
Yeah.
Thanks, Pete, for updating the MicroJet meeting timeline. Toby, is there anything you want to call out for the snapshot restore work?
So there's currently some effort on the way to update the API to handle appending new environment variables after restore. So it's currently in progress. This will enable, this will give more flexibility to users to better reflect the restore environments if it differs from the snapshot environments, and it will give users control to add environment variables, which for certain web applications, they rely on these inputs to set up the config for the app server. So this is a necessary tool for enhancing capabilities there. So that's the ongoing work, and that's basically it right now.
Thanks, Toby. Jack, with where we are with 17, has the Loom work restarted yet? Jack isn't on the call. Toby, I'll toss that one at you too.
Yeah, so the Loom work hasn't restarted. Jack right now is still focusing on one of the method handle issues. So that's the high priority right now. As soon as we get 0.29.1 out, then we're going to transition to Loom.
Cheng, is there an update on Panama?
Hi, can you hear me again?
Yes, you can.
Okay. In terms of the down code, I already pretty much finished updating all the codes against in terms of phase 2, 3, and 4 against the latest API changes in Java 17. And I will get back to check the code on app call this week. The first step is still double check against the latest change in Java 17 to see what happens out there. and we'll get started from there to go forward. So that's everything on my side.
Thanks, Cheng. For the monitoring strategy, I think it makes sense to continue to defer this until after Java 17 ships. And then we should probably book a dedicated meeting to discuss where we want to take this. Is there anything else that we want to discuss today? Then thank you, everyone, and we'll have the next one of these calls next week.
Thanks.